it's back to coach. You got to switch it to me. Oh, are we on? I can't hear you.
Just technical difficulties.
Oh, and you got the feedback a little bit. See, I can hear you echoing. All right, that's better. Now you got me. I'm ugly. So, all right, we're live, right? We're good? We're on. So, a couple things. I want to thank everyone in the studio. I want to thank everyone at kvar.com. I want to thank everybody here, Marcy, AG, for being the driver and helping out. And, of course, Rory in the studio and Q behind the scenes doing some of the editing. This is a super exciting episode. I want to thank everybody at Shop No Gi. It's official now, right?
Yes, sir.
Don't say anything yet. It's supposed to be a big announcement. I want to thank everyone at Shop No Gi. Make sure you head over to Shop No Gi. This is going to be really exciting. We're going to get into that on the show. But I have a really exciting guest today. We're kind of really rounding out a series that I've been excited about, kind of stemming from all the UFC, BJJ stuff, the guys at 245. I'm really excited about this, but more excited because he's my coach, Coach Casey. Doo-doo-doo.
Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. So, Coach comes to us, and for those of you that don't know, if you've been living under a rock, he has fast become the absolute authority, in my opinion, on all things jiu-jitsu in Nevada. And I know he won't take credit for that, and we'll get into that later, but 10th Planet here, he's done a great job the last few years establishing and building something really special. And you have a lot of guys that show him an insane amount of respect, in my opinion. And I know he'll always say maybe it's respect he doesn't deserve. Maybe, I know you'll be, as humble as can be. But truly, everybody comes out of the woodwork for Coach. And he does a fantastic job with his students and with everybody and his competitors. And I don't know where he finds the time. But I want to dive right in. And I want to start not at the beginning so much, but really get into why 10th Planet and why you went down this road of being a gym owner coming out of the oil and gas business and how you ended up here.
Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you for the intro. I really appreciate it. So I was in the oil and gas industry for a while.
Making money.
Exactly. And it didn't quite align with, my views on the world, and it wasn't quite how I wanted to make my living. And then I would say about 10 years ago, they adopted the lean business model, which they took from Japan. And as we went through the process as a company of learning how to lean everything out, I realized that I should probably do the same thing with my personal finances as well. And I was already a gym owner at the time and already coaching, but I quickly learned that controlling your spending is the easiest way to financial freedom. That's the quickest way to do it. And so I basically took the model that the oil company I was working for was teaching us as employees and just applied it to my personal life. And then eventually I was able to quit and just pursue, full-time coaching. And that is a whole nother story. It was inspired by having a child at an older age. At 40, I started having kids again. And I wanted to just be around for them.
Is 40 still old to have kids? Because I got none and I'm 38, Coach. So, I got to get started. But, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think stuff happens along the way in life that kind of you have these epiphanies and you do what I call like a lifestyle change. And it's not – because people would say you were crazy. Because when you tell me the oil and gas story, it reminds me of me working in finance. Then I went to the academy and all these different things that happen along the way. People don't realize you have stuff that – I guess the word triggers you into other stuff, and that's probably the simplest way to put it. But you had some things happen along the way, and you were kind of like, you know what? I want a better lifestyle than this. And I've heard you tell the story many times, and I just want better than this. And it's not about the money, but it's about the path and where it's going to lead you. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely correct. The oil company I worked for was very good to me. Benefits, a nice salary. It was good. The management was great. It was just that something inside of me felt that I needed to do something different. And then, just cleaning up my finances and having a child late, it just kind of all came together at a perfect time and inspired the change. And I knew I literally decided on a Sunday night that I was going to quit and move to Vegas and open a gym here. And went and talked to my wife. My wife supported the decision. And by that following Friday, we had already found the house that we ended up eventually buying.
And I wanna definitely touch on this because people don't realize this about you, and to a lot of the students that may listen. Family is insanely important to you, like on another level important. And I see it in your approach and how you do things and how you conduct yourself. And you always have one in tow or two in tow with you. And that's super, super important to every decision that you make. It shapes everything. And I think that's such a great foundation. And were you always like that, or was that something that just kind of came along the way?
No, I wasn't always like that. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm governed by emotions, and that's how I make my decisions. And so, as a youth, I got into a ton of trouble, lots of trouble. And when I allow my emotions to govern my decisions, then I typically find myself getting into trouble in those scenarios. So as I started to grow and become an adult, I decided to kind of live my life by pillars. And so pillar number one, obviously, is I'm a husband and a father. And then I'm a coach and a business owner. And so whenever I go to make a decision, I just always ask myself, how is this going to impact my family? How is this going to impact my students? How is this going to impact my businesses? And if it impacts them positively, then I go ahead and do it. If it's negative, I don't. And it's pretty much that simple.
And you got into jiu-jitsu. A lot of people don't know this. I mean, mainly it was self-defense. It was something, to get in shape. You talked about that. And it wasn't so much to compete. You weren't like you always say that you weren't like a world-class competitor. You weren't trying to go that route. And you got into a lot of scraps. Like you said, you got into it with a lot of cholos. That's the term you like to use. Cholo.
Yes, that's correct.
And, and that's part of the game, right? So along the way, it starts out as self-defense, and it starts out that way, but you've taken a really serious approach to the competitors now, and you take that very, very seriously, and that compromises a lot of your time. A lot of the time that you give up is to your students and those particularly that are competing and those that are pushing it out there. Has that always been something you wanted to do, is do that kind of high-level coaching? Because you got guys in 245, you got guys in every match, you got guys in Contenders Series. I mean, you have a really great stable of dudes and ladies out there that you're training and working with on a constant basis. What kind of drove that?
Well, that's an interesting question as well. So I started grappling when I was young. I started wrestling at 7 at a rec club. And then, of course, growing up in the 80s, I did martial arts, like regular karate. But because I got into trouble as a youth, I was never really able to compete in high school because I just didn't have the grades to do it. So when I started getting back into grappling and jiu-jitsu and fighting, I have a few fights. I wasn't very good at it. I quickly realized that I'm not the athlete. So I think that makes me a better coach because I've always had to really pay attention to detail and technique. And I think that in order for me to be competitive, I have to be very sharp with the technique. And I think that translates into coaching. And then because of my pillars, where it's family, friends, and students and business, I just figure if I'm training these guys and they're fighting, who else is going to care more than me because I love them? Like I don't train fighters that I don't care about. It doesn't happen. I mean, they might come into the gym, but you will never see me traveling with someone that I don't actually care about. Like I'm not really in it for that. I'm in it just to help people. And so the fact that I'm not a great athlete really transitioned well into my coaching because I've always had to pay attention to detail, and I think I can translate that better because physically it's always been harder for me to catch up.
And some guys, I always say this, Coach, some guys always gravitate towards what I call like the algorithm. They kind of gravitate towards the study of something, If you look at Bill Belichick, I think he was, a Wesleyan guy. He wasn't this stud football player playing in the NFL. His dad played one game for the Lions, and he was pulled out of the locker room and was a scout for Navy for 1,000 years. And you look at a lot of coaches and guys who are exceptional at it. A lot of them just gravitate towards that study of the craft, and that's what they love, and that's where they focus a lot of their energy is kind of the minutia. You know what I mean? The non-exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's an accurate statement. If you look back at all the basketball coaches, over time they've always been the little guy, the guy who had to really focus on positioning, anticipation, looking at ball movement, where it's going to end up. And I think in MMA, you're seeing that change a lot because information is so widely available, and some of the best athletes in the world are becoming the best coaches too. So it doesn't hold true all the time. But I think in my case, it gave me a unique perspective because I've always had to focus on it.
Yeah, I think by and large, though, most of your successful coaches come from that kind of stock. Now, you get into this kind of Vegas atmosphere, and you have so many highline great athletes here. It's interesting the way it all breaks up. You have a collection of gyms. You've done something that's really unique that I don't think everybody realizes, and I know you're a humble guy, and I don't expect a response from you. Because you're going to be humble about this, but I'm going to be honest. I've been around Coach now for probably, 10 months, 9 months, 10 months, pretty closely. I'm with him, have dinner with him, I see him. He's fast become the guy in the community that a lot of people gravitate towards. And I've had Eddie B on, and I've had Chad Lyman on, and a lot of the folks that talk about you, they talk about you with such respect. And since, the passing of Robert Follis, and we talked about that with a lot of those guys, you always say, I'm not here to replace him, but you've done a great job kind of galvanizing the jiu-jitsu community in this area. And I don't want you to say, because you'll respond and you'll say, oh, no, I don't know about that. But I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've seen it play out, and I've talked to these guys for an extended period of time. So I don't think I'm talking out of my you-know-what. But you've done a fabulous job kind of bringing it all together and being inclusive and being a guy who says, come one, come all, come hang out. Come to my open mat. Come to my promotion ceremony. Spend time with me. And you're just kind of there for them. And you're not afraid to, there's coaches that won't walk in another person's gym. You're like, hey, we got to go down to Extreme today. Okay, cool. We got to go down here. Okay, cool. Just the way everybody approaches you, whether it's Vinny or it's any of these guys, it's really exciting to see, and it's something that I think you don't get enough credit for.
I appreciate that. I've really one of the reasons I think I have a lot of fighters, and when Follis left, it created a vacuum, and I think part of the reason why some of his fighters transitioned over to me is because I pay attention. I don't just pay attention to the fight and who they have up next. I'm paying attention to what moves and drives them. And I think being able to pull the heartstrings and get them motivated to do the things that they don't want to do, I think that's something that I'm really strong at. It's just kind of and in the gym, it's always been culture first. Culture is the most important thing inside of my academy. And it's an all-inclusive, let's get after it, let's work hard, and be cool and have fun. You think about it, if you're fighting 3 times a year, you have 3 fight camps, that's 8 weeks times 3. That's a lot of the year that you're dedicating. Yeah, it's half a year, and you're dedicating, you're dieting, you're feeling worn down all the time. Imagine if you didn't like where you had to go to do that. That would be terrible. So I just make it a point to make everything kind of light but hard work at the same time.
Now, the other thing AG will probably laugh at this, but the other thing that you don't get enough credit for, and I talk about this with almost every guest that's kind of inundated with what I call bullshit. So and it's not bullshit, but you'll know what I mean when I say it. You're constantly getting bombarded with people that are like, Coach, I want to be the next big thing. Will you take me under your wing? It's so hard to sift through all that, and I don't know how you do it with a smile and how the hell you keep a straight face half the time. It's all these people coming up to you and just kind of being like, hey, Coach, I'm here, and they have like a bag in their hand and a prayer.
I mean, that's part of my marching orders as a human, is to get people to perform higher than their abilities, whether that's in business, parenting, fighting, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I kind of look at that as like part of the process, right? So, but I have become very capable of dealing with the people that are not serious. You know, they'll come to me, hey, I got a business idea, I want to do this. And then I give them a list of 10 things to answer before the second meeting. I say, yeah, we can have a meeting. We'll talk about it. I'll invest. I'll help you. We'll do whatever we have to do. Let me see your business plan. Let me see where you're going to get your investments from. And it's literally a list of questions. And 99.9% of people that come to me, once I send them that list, they never come back with, you know, with it at least done.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you do, you know, I don't know how you keep a straight face half the time. And they're all great folks. Everybody's always, you know, I showed up on the doorstep, I think a day after I got here when I first moved down here. And I remember reaching out and saying, where do I train in Vegas to Ruben? And he threw it out there. And then I ended up on your doorstep. But yeah, I mean, I see it over and over and over again. People are like, hey, I want to be the next big thing, coach. So what advice do you give folks that are just going to show up at the 10th Planet Henderson or downtown doorstep and say, hey, Coach Casey, I'm here. I want to be the next Ben Saunders. Where do you begin?
Oh, wow.
Give them like three. Don't give them the 10, but give them 3 pieces of advice before they even show up.
I'll say, you need to want it more than I want it for you.
That's a great line, yeah, absolutely.
That's number one. Number 2, let's not talk about it. Just keep showing up. And then, you know, why do you think you should be able to have it? Like, you know, at a certain point, it's to think that you can be Ben Saunders at 24 years old, you're walking into the gym and you're like, I want to be the next Ben Saunders. That's kind of arrogant. You know, that's a man that spent his whole life training and developing those skill sets. So it's like, even feeling that someone can go and just jump into the UFC and start fighting, that's moderately disrespectful. Just even the goal, you know? So it's like, for me, it's like, all right, I just need you to be quiet and show up. And then you've got to want it way more. Like, I should be pulling you back. I shouldn't be pushing you. I should tell you to take a day off. You know, I shouldn't be calling you and tell you to come into the gym. And if you can do all those things, then maybe you got a chance. But there's a lot of hard work and a lot of broke days and a lot of injuries that go into it long before you get to that point.
And I always say, you know, I simplified it down to like the simplest of things. I always say, expect nothing, blame no one, and do your job.
Perfect.
If you approach anything with that attitude, and I always say one other line, you can control 2 things in life. This is all you can control. You can control what time you get out of bed, and you can control how loyal you are. Everything else will change around you. So I just told you the 5 truest things you're ever going to hear in the history of the universe.
I love it.
Expect nothing, blame no one, and do your job. You can control what time you get out of bed, and you can control how loyal you are. The rest, you can't control. And that's how life goes. So if you're looking to do anything, whether it's train with coach, whether it's get a new job, whether it's participate in anything, and some people, coach, you'll attest to this, they love sleep more than they love success. They like to sleep. They like to, you know, dole around, play video games, do whatever. But don't show up on your doorstep looking for, you know, support. So that's a huge component. And hopefully to all the guys out there that you have taken under their wing, they realize some of the sacrifice you make to get them there.
Yeah, I think it's an education process, you know, especially when you got guys that are already in the UFC. They're just so used to getting stuff. Everybody's, you know, they're like the hot chick, and everybody's trying to buy them drinks. And, you know, that's probably the first big obstacle that you need to get over. It's just like, hey, man, like whether you're an amateur or you're a UFC fighter, to me, you're the same. Like, I'm not going to treat any of the fighters any different. So you guys all got to come in and pull weight. You know, I really like, what's the coach from Minnesota's name? I can't remember.
Wrestling?
No, he's a football coach. He says row the boat. You know, that's like his big theme, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I agree, you know, if there's 6 people in a boat, we should all be rowing in the same direction. And if you're rowing in the opposite direction, you got to get out. PJ Fleck, yep.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And that's just solid advice to give everybody. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to how bad you want it. Like you said, you have to want it more than anybody else wants it. And what I've seen kind of in the short time I've been here in the evolution, I want to get to this. You're really, and I said this to AG, what I love about you is I operate in seasons. So there's seasons for everything. And there's seasons to train, there's seasons to not train, there's seasons to get better, there's seasons for family. You have to take time and designate it for certain things when appropriate. Now, you're going through a season, you got young ones going off to college, you got all this stuff going on, but you're really I'm seeing this play out, and a lot of the students will realize you're really getting your arms around your businesses here and transitioning them to the next step, whether that's with the online store, which I'm super excited about because I love branding and I love marketing and I love all that stuff, so I'll spend 3 hours talking someone's ear off about some bullshit they don't even want to hear. But you're really getting your arms around everything because you're in that season. You've reached that point where you're like, I got to get my arms around all this. How exciting is it to see the business grow? Because I'm familiar with some of the growth spurts you've just recently experienced. So that's so much fun. And now you're kind of picking through the pieces and you're getting your arms around everything, and you're kind of getting it to where you want to be. How much fun are you having doing that and dialing it all in?
Oh, it's the most fun. It's one of the most exciting times in my career. You got to be careful what you wish for. This whole jiu-jitsu thing started as a hobby. And now there's about 20 people from what we've created that don't have jobs anymore. And, I feel like I work hard, but I don't have a job. So that's like the most exciting thing is that this thing is turning into a real business, and it's providing an out for a lot of the people that I love. I mean, the list goes on and on, but Andy Ballmore, he's one of my business partners. He lived in my house. I'm the godfather of all of his children. He left his mom's garage and moved into my house, and now, he's one of my partners. Ron Turner, same thing. And then, of course, I've been able to hire a lot of my friends to help me support the business and grow other businesses. We brought AG in with Shop No Gi, and he's really done a great job with that. And man, it's exciting. The most important thing is, like, as this business gets bigger, I need to adapt and treat it like a business. It's no longer a hobby. So for many, many years, I just treated it as a hobby. But as you know, I mean, you've seen the last year, I've changed a ton as far as like my approach. And now I'm starting, as my children are getting older, I'm looking at the legacy for them. The play is no longer for me. It's not, I want to get a pair of Jordans or I want to drive a Hummer. That's not the point. Like, I'm trying to create a legacy for my kids that they could benefit from long after I'm gone. And so that's kind of what's motivating me now. And then the other factor is I want to try to get as many people as I know out of the grind and get them living the dreams, just because I think the narrative that we came up with, that scarcity mindset from parents that grew up with parents that were raised in the Great Depression. My parents, my grandparents were in the Great Depression, and it was that scarcity mindset. Like, we used to look at our wealth. My mom, when I first got my own place for the first time, my mom came over and put canned goods, rice and sugar in the pantry, and she was like, okay, you're set. And getting a job with benefits and getting paid money for your hours spent, that's an old way of thinking, and we can do it different. We can chase our dreams and our passions and make a living out of it. So there's a lot of things going on. And as this business gets bigger, I need to treat it as such. That way we can save more and more people.
And I say this all the time. It comes down to bringing on the right people.
Oh, yeah.
And I advise a lot of companies all the time, and I sit down with them, and they'll say things to me. And they'll say, John, I can't find a good marketing guy, or I can't find a good sales guy. And most of the time, those companies are in the $1 to $3 million range. And why do they say that? They say that a lot of times because they're paying themselves. They've recently started paying themselves. And they can't, in their mind, justify paying someone a decent wage. So I tell them all the time, I'm like, you can't find anyone good because you're trying to pay people lint, and you're trying to move. You have to find the right person. You have to take care of them, and you have to bring them in. And sometimes that means you taking a little bit of a step to the side to bring in the right people to move that mission forward. I said, I said to one business owner I just sat with, he has about an $8 million company. I said, you can't keep hiring people and paying them $30,000. Water seeks its own level. You're not going to get that type of talent. So it's a difficult the hardest transition for most companies is to go from 5 million to 10 million. It's the hardest transition in many ways. It's the hardest thing for them to build. And I use that as kind of a widget number. For some people, it's 3 to 5. There's always that kind of like, I'm paying myself 70, 80 grand. I'm happy. I don't want to upset the apple cart, but I don't want to bring anyone to take things off my plate. So it's a very, very difficult thing, Coach, to do that. But you've cracked the formula that a lot of people can't crack, which is you almost, it's funny because everybody knows the Eddie Bravo documentary where Eddie says, there's no money in jiu-jitsu and I'm broke. You've cracked the formula to where you figured out a way to make a buck. I'm not going to, say there's millions in it just yet, but you're cracking the formula. And it does take tightening the ship and tightening everything up and bringing in the right people and dialing it in a little bit more and getting the right advisors around you and getting the right people. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, I'm using the skateboarding model, so like skateboarding in the 80s and the 70s, they had to create an infrastructure to support the lifestyle. And jiu-jitsu, we're probably on generation number 4 now. You had the Gracies that came over, then you had like the Dirty Dozen, the Americans that got their black belts, and then you had that third generation, and I think I'm like the 4th generation now. And so what's happening is people are coming up in jiu-jitsu while they're getting their degrees and while they're getting their classic educations, and instead of going into a different realm, they're just staying in the jiu-jitsu business and they're creating the infrastructure for it. Right now is a really exciting time because there's so many people that do it and they don't necessarily want to go outside of jiu-jitsu culture to buy the stuff that they want. So it's an exciting time, and growth is imminent. It's going to happen no matter what. Like, we're not going to change it. So we should not only capitalize on it, but we should also try to perpetuate the growth. That's another thing. Everybody thinks we're competing, and we're not competing. I'm not competing with anybody. Like, other gym owners feel like I might be trying to compete with them. I'm trying to grow jiu-jitsu as a whole and bring more and more people in it. The more people that are doing it, the better off we all are.
Do you think there's a jiu-jitsu bubble?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a jiu-jitsu bubble. I've seen it already. Like, when I first opened my first academy, it was really easy to get a lease. I went to the property manager and I was like, hey, I want to rent this place. He was like, okay, what are you going to do? I had a business plan. I showed it to him and he was like, all right. But now so many people have come and failed because one of the things that people don't see is, just like any business, you can't be profitable right away. So people look at successful academies like here in town. They look at Drysdale. They might look at me. They look at Hector at Cobrinha's. And they're like, oh, man, these guys are always smiling. They're having fun. They're traveling. They're making money. Like, I want to open up and do the same thing. And they open up and they just think the money's going to come in. But what they don't realize is I had a full-time job the whole time I was doing this until the last 4 years when I finally retired from my oil gig. I had a full-time job. My wife's an attorney. Like, we were still struggling. We made a ton of money, but it was like a sieve. We were just putting money into it. And then eventually we broke through the other side. So when you say jiu-jitsu bubble, if I tried to get a new lease with a new property manager that doesn't know me, they scrutinize us so much because so many academies open and close that they think we're kind of flaky, and they kind of put the CrossFitters in with the jiu-jitsu guys too. And you just see them pop up and close down within a year. It happens all over the place.
Yeah, and I always try to tell guys, you have to have a differentiator. You have to have something that's going to set you apart, and you have to have your hand in a lot of pots. You have to have web sales. I mean, these aren't dirty secrets, guys. You have to have all these things going for you, and there's a lot of criticism that comes down for guys who aren't like the old garage style, just come in and train and pay $50 or whatever. You have to have a business model. I mean, this is 2019. You can't just throw a few mats down and pray. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also give advice to any business owner is stay very, very specific and stay in your lane too. So the first thing you see is like a jiu-jitsu academy opens up, they start struggling, then they put a kickboxing program in and they kind of half-ass that. And then they put in yoga and they half-ass that. And then, for me primarily, I mean, we've put in yoga in the past and we've done kickboxing as well. But primarily what we do is no-gi jiu-jitsu. And I just stay in my lane and I'm good at it. And so when you come in to train with me, you're just going to get that specific skill set, and you're going to get it at the best that you can get here in town. And it's working.
Yeah, I think the only reason the yoga thing's a bit of a boondoggle is because it's Vegas, and there's a yoga studio in every corner, and there's a Pilates studio in every corner. So that becomes like a tough boondoggle here, specifically here. If it was like one of the more rural type gyms, it might be an easier program to implement, and it goes hand in hand with the jiu-jitsu in many ways. But I think it's a tough one here because there's so many foofy yoga studios in the
There
area.
are a ton.
Yeah, there's tons. But one of the things, I wanted to, kind of highlight that I've noticed about you that's awesome in so many ways is as much as you're in love with the competitors and you're driven towards that side of the business, you do an amazing job always bringing up the guys that have lost like 50 or 100 or 1,000 pounds. Not 1,000, but you know what I mean. But, there's a lot of guys in that gym, and I look at them, and like, they'll walk in, and you'll be like, how much weight did you lose? Jiu-jitsu offers so many different health benefits, and you kind of always highlight that because I think, between the three of us, we're all kind of fat kids inside. And, we get out there and it's just something to move around and keep the blood flowing. But you got a lot of guys that it's a way of life, and they're losing tons and tons of weight.
Yeah, I used to own a company back in the day, a clothing company that was around jiu-jitsu. I won't name the name now, but one of our taglines was "Jiu-jitsu saved my life." And I firmly believe that. My own sister's 47 years old. She's a little bit overweight. She's lost like 60 pounds. She didn't feel like she could train jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is for everybody. And I've seen it change so many people. I've seen jiu-jitsu get people off of opiates. I've seen people get people healthy, type 2 diabetes goes away with jiu-jitsu. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people come in with type 2 diabetes. They start training, they lose some weight, and that's gone. One of the things that I know, I focus on the regular students, just the normal, like mom and pop type guys, but I still don't do a good enough job at that. That's something that I'm really focusing on. We've had talks about that in the past. It's one of the problems with jiu-jitsu academies is if you come in and you just keep your mouth shut, a lot of times you just get overlooked, So it's the people that are out on the front competing the most. Those are the ones that have everybody's attention. And it's really easy to get lost in the mix. And so, I'm really making a conscious effort to really focus on everybody. And I've always been that way, but we can still improve there too.
Yeah, I've been critical of that in the past, but I think it's more a byproduct of I came from SBG in Montana, which there's not a ton of competitors at, and it was more of 90% of the people were just regular guys, people going to train, so it was more of a system-based jiu-jitsu. So when you go from that to this in Nevada, where you have access to everybody, it's easy to get drunk on the, I got this one and I got that one, and it's exciting to see. So you have to balance it. And as a student, you love being on the mat with guys that are high level, because AG brought this up before. When you go to other gyms, you're like you're a stud. You're battle hardened. You know what I mean? Like I'll go to some other gyms and I'm like, oh, I kind of am better than I thought, because you're used to getting your head pounded in 10th Planet. Now, it's one of those things you have to adjust as a student to be like, okay, I'm not in Kansas anymore. You see what I mean? You have to kind of do that adjustment.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's also why competition is really good, because it kind of lets you know where you stand. Like, I'm telling you, I try to tell my fighters and regular students, I actually talked about this last night at the end of practice. We had Mark Madsen in. He's a 3-time Olympian from Denmark. Wrestler. The guy's a stud UFC fighter, 155. I rolled 5 rounds during practice last night, and I'm the owner of the gym, and I got smashed all 5 rounds. Like, literally didn't even sniff anything that looked remotely like success at all last night. And so at the end of class, when I circled everybody up, I let them know, you're never the best, that you're not usually going to have your best day or your worst day, usually somewhere in the middle. But every once in a while, you're going to have a great day, and every once in a while, you're going to have a bad day. And today was my bad day, but it's really important that we keep things in perspective and we don't let those define us, and we don't dwell on them too much, because, I'm going to probably turn around tomorrow and have the best day of my life.
Mm. And you're never the stud you think you are. That's everywhere. That's everything, Coach.
Oh, last night.
Yeah. I always say this to everybody, like before a show, like when I used to run booths, and I say this to the team, everybody's somebody, just ask them. They'll tell you how great they are. So you have to kind of, it's tough sometimes to be humble, but it's great being in that gym because you're always humbled. So you're kind of always pushed down, more so than almost anywhere else. So it's a lot of fun. And there's a learning curve, and there's a learning curve I went through adjusting to that and learning a little bit that, hey, I'm not in Montana anymore, and this is a different environment where your top 2 or 3 guys are probably studs. Here, the 50th guy's a stud, or the 40th guy, or the 30th guy. You know what I mean? And that's what makes it a little more humbling and a little more difficult along the way to kind of figure out, where do I fit in this? Because everybody kind of wants to know where they fit in the pecking order, in the scheme of things. And you created a nice environment where it's a little bit of a cyclone, and it's good. You'll never know where you're kind of always in the storm. You're kind of always getting pushed around.
Yeah, I would say in Henderson, we're probably somewhere around 75% competitors, something like that. Like
it's
even
heavy.
Yeah, even the normal. Most of the normal guys are doing jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Yeah, it's good. You know, it's super competitive, but I love it, and I don't mind that once I kind of adjusted my own thought process around it and kind of, you know, understood it a little bit better. I was like, okay, I'm not in Montana anymore. It's not like 5 studs and then, you know, 50 kind of not bottom feeders, but normal, you know, guys just doing jiu-jitsu. But I came from an environment that was more the lawyer, the doctor, the regular guy working in the factory, and everyone just kind of showed up and rolled. And here, you never know who you're going to get on the mat. You walk in, AG and I talk about this, it's crazy sometimes when you walk in. You just never know who's going to be there.
Yeah, we had 14 black belts in there a couple of weeks ago.
That's insane.
Yeah, I was just looking back. I remember we canceled open mat when we first opened. We canceled Sunday open mat. We canceled Friday practice because we just couldn't get anybody in. It would be me and Andrew. Mm-hmm. That's it. And now there's 50, 60 guys, 14 black belts. It's insane. It's crazy.
The open mat has got out of hand on Sunday. That's something you might have to deal with at some point in a good way, but yeah.
Maybe get a bigger gym, but, you know.
We might have to knock the wall down involuntarily in some way.
Take over the vacuum place.
Vacuum place next door. But seriously, it has gotten to a point where you'll get a couple rolls and then you have to sit out a couple because the mat is super full and super crazy. Now, you have some big stuff coming up. We're going to come back to Shop No Gi, but I want to dive into UFC 245 for a minute. This is an exciting card. I know you're pumped up about it. I'm pumped up about it. We're going to be there. It's going to be awesome. And you got Ben in it, and who could ask for a better situation? It's phenomenal. He's going up against Matt Brown. There's so much cool shit on that card, Coach. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and, you know, it's 2 kind of icons for years in the business that have been around. And I see that division, you know, you have Colby at the top, you know, going at it with Usman, and then you're going to kind of see it shake out. And I think the winner of that throws himself almost right in the mix, Coach. What do you say?
Between Ben and Matt Brown? I think, yeah, I mean, possibly. Ben's coming off of a few losses, and Matt's coming off a long layoff, but both of their names still hold
strong.
weight.
Yeah,
they're strong names. Yeah, they're a little bit like they're a little longer in the tooth, I think, but
and after what George did, it's, you know, that someone could be catapulted right into that mix.
I agree. I mean, there's something that cannot be purchased with money, and the only way it can be attained is by years and years is experience. That's it. And both of those guys have that in spades. Yeah, they have it in spades. And, you know, just getting, you know, I've had the opportunity to train Ben for a while now, just kind of off and on. You know, I went with him to a couple of fights, one in Sao Paulo and one in Sweden. And we actually got him into Vegas this time. And, man, he's looking sharp. And
he looks damn good. You see the picture there? He looks chiseled.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've always felt he needed the most was just being more athletic. You know, because technically he's probably one of the best fighters ever as far as like jiu-jitsu and striking goes. His technical knowledge is insane. But now you look at his body, and the UFC PI has done a really good job at getting him more physical. Yeah. And you know Matt Brown. You know for a fact Matt Brown's taking this fight seriously.
Super serious.
So it's going to be nuts. Both of these guys, and they respect each other. You know, there's no hate, there's no love lost. They're just going to go in and try to kill each other.
Yeah, it's gonna be probably one of the best fights hands down on the card. Obviously, selfishly, because I'm friends on both sides, I view Ben as a teammate. So obviously, there's that. I'd like to see them go 5 rounds and have a stellar war. You'd like to see Ben get in and out quick, you know. But of course, it's gonna be an awesome battle. But I do see that division as just so wide open that whoever gets this is a great fight for both of them, and especially for Ben. And I'll speak as a teammate for a second because Matt being the name that he is and has been in the past, it catapults him. And don't forget, George was coming off a couple of losses, and then George caught that steam, and he catapulted himself right in the mix. So it's exciting. It's super fun to see this kind of play out in that division. And then we have Colby and Usman at the top, of that division and the card. How do you see that fight shaking out?
Who, Usman and Colby?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I don't really like picking fights too much.
I know.
But
I got to put you on the spot, though.
Yeah, I think the Colby's pressure and his ability to just throw 500 punches around, just nonstop pressure, is going to be really hard to deal with. But I think Usman's going to edge him out. I think athletically, Usman's probably better. And I think when you're taking like two guys of similar skill set, they're both good wrestlers. They both can put a lot of volume on you, and they're both going to just constantly punch and wrestle. I think those situations are when the athlete, that's the extra factor. And I would say Usman's probably the better athlete. So I think over a 5-round fight, I feel like he's going to be able to edge him out. I think it'll be real competitive early, and then that athleticism is going to start taking over.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. I think it's been a long time coming. In coming back to Ben and Matt, Ben talked about this on the podcast with me. You brought up a good point about him dialing in his body with the PI. He talked a lot about this, and it made sense. If he can just dial in his ability to use his range a lot better, he's going to be lethal in that division because he's so long and rangy. And historically, what we've seen with guys like Stylebender, John Jones, once they learn how to manage that distance effectively, and all fighting is a management of distance, he's gonna be unstoppable. He'll be if he can dial that in, he's gonna be. And I don't want to give away the secret formula here to anyone listening, but like that's it's not a secret. John does a great job keeping people away and aggravating them and making them do something stupid. And that's kind of what I think Ben is looking for, and that's what he's hoping for, I think. But that's my opinion.
Well, I mean that's the whole art of fighting, right? Like if I'm going to go in and get into 50-50 battles with somebody, then anyone can win. That's not technical. That's not using your brain. That's why boxing's so interesting to me. Boxing is so interesting because it's about dictating to the other fighter. It's not about necessarily being more physical in boxing. It's like, I'm going to make you fight my fight, and I'm going to make you chase me, and you're going to have to work around what I'm doing to try to get off what you're trying to do. And I think the people that take that approach in MMA, it's amazing. Like, if you look at Stylebender is really good at making you take risks to score. And when you start taking risks, that's where you start to capitalize. I think people punch too hard. I think they try to kick too hard. I like how George Masvidal just kind of flicks him out there, and he's just pap, 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 pap. And Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz are both similar in this, in that approach and fighting long and tall. I mean, that should be everybody's advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, it's not. We're not making up a secret formula here. This is known stuff, but absolutely. If you look out there across the spectrum now, you've been in the game out here 4 years, and you've been close with a lot of these guys. What fighter do you look at and be selfish for a second, and who do you say, like, geez, I'd love to work with that guy?
Man, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit. Pretty much everybody I work with are the ones that I want to work with. Like, I love working with Joe Benavidez and Tim Elliott. Julian Erosa is another guy that comes to mind.
He's got a motor that doesn't quit.
Yeah.
Does not quit.
Yeah, he's crazy. That's probably the real negative of MMA. If there's 1,000 fights a month, 500 people are going to lose. And that's 500 people that put their heart and soul into this. And it's just so gut-wrenching. You get a guy that deserves to win and he loses. Like, you can't expect anything in MMA.
Right.
It's a terrible business.
And I think, was it recently, like, Tim experienced some of that. He got caught in a quick guillotine or whatever. And I'll see him, I think, tomorrow when Gina's I think he got caught in a quick guillotine. It happens. It's the draw, It just kind of bounces that way sometimes. But selfishly, there has to be somebody out there that you're like, geez, I'd love to, get him for a week or for a camp. There's got to be someone, Coach. Don't hold back. Don't be a homer. Don't give me the yearbook answer.
One guy I always wanted to work with just because of like his talent and like looking at him, but he ended up going to a great place to train, Kevin Lee.
Okay.
I always really like his attitude in the gym. He's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. Like totally like his interview persona is a lot different than his inside the gym persona. And, you know, he would come into the gym and train with us occasionally. And he was always a guy that I was like, man, like this kid's got it, because he's still super young. He's got a ton of experience, and his skill sets are things that cannot be taught. You know, the fact that he's a savage wrestler, you cannot teach a 25-year-old how to wrestle. You got to learn how to wrestle as a kid. So it was just like when Tony Ferguson came to me back right before UFC 166. He came to me and we started training together, and it was literally like a Ferrari came, and all I had to do was a little bit of tuning on it. But like I really didn't add much to his game at all. You know, if anything, he probably influenced my game more than I did his. But those are the kind of guys, you know, that come in and you're just like, damn. And that's kind of how I felt about Kevin Lee. And I like him too. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
And he ended up going with Faraz, and that was the right decision, obviously, if you saw his last fight. I mean, we would have liked to keep him in Vegas, but, you know, things happen. And
I think there's always people you look at from afar and you kind of admire how they do things. And for whatever reason, the way the ball bounces, you're not as close, or you don't become as close of friends, or whatever it may be. But you're always kind of like, geez, you know, I like the way they do things. And that's not, you know, a knock to anyone you work with currently or work with later in the future. It's just more, you kind of always admire how somebody does something, or their approach, or how they handle their business. And you're like, geez, that's pretty good. You know, there's a science behind it, and how they deal with themselves and handle themselves. And everybody has a different shtick. Like Colby Covington's very much like that. When you meet him inside a gym, he's a different person than how he is. It's a persona. It's something he's creating, and everybody has a different feel for the game and how they're going to play it. Does it surprise you at all in the UFC that there's so much pressure now to not just be a finisher and be someone that draws the limelight, but also now to have the persona?
oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that I hate. Is one, that you get a paycheck to make weight and then a paycheck to win. I'm watching that business model really handcuff fighters. And then the fact that the contracts are only in the organization's benefit. So people are getting cut on a 4-fight contract. They lose 2 fights, they're out. So this is causing like the fights to be less exciting. It's actually having a negative effect, or the opposite effect. Like if it was more like the Ryzen model where they were like, hey, listen, just have a good fight and you'll come back. Just winning and losing doesn't really matter. Just make a good fight. Then you see fighters fighting loose, and they're actually fighting. So yeah, I mean, MMA. So now, in order to make money, you have to be a heel. You have to, you know. I mean, very few people like Conor have countries behind them. You know, if you're from Russia, like Khabib, you can be cool, and Russia's just going to support, and you're going to make tons of pay-per-view. Conor has Ireland, you know. But if you're a guy like Tony, and you live here in the United States, it's split, you know, regionally. And
so secular, yeah.
Yeah, so like Colby Covington, you know, he had to create that, you know.
Yeah, he's from Oregon. He didn't, you know, there's nobody there.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, I was with him when Verdum and him got into it in Australia. I was there with Jesse Jess, and we were literally, Colby was going on the bus to ESPN to do an interview with us over there. And we were standing out front when all of that happened. And when Colby was in the van with us going to the interview, he was so cool. Like, I was like, wait, you're not like that. Like, you're a normal dude. Like, cool. And so I know that he has to get uncomfortable doing that because it's not really authentic to him. But, I mean, that's how you make money in this sport nowadays.
Yeah, the model, it's funny. I talked about this with a lot of the guys. The model is similar to almost like a WWE model, coach. And that's where they got that from. I think it'll evolve. I think it has to evolve. I think there's a lot of smart people over at the UFC. I think it has to evolve at some point. Right now, they have to kind of sift through it. The sport has grown so much in the last 3 to 5 years. You have to remember, we're still in the infancy. We looked this up before, Rory. UFC 1 was like 93. So it wasn't until really, 2005 that the UFC got its legs underneath it. It took about 12, 15 years before we really knew what we had. And now at this point, it's going through a period where I think it's going to have to transition again with the growth of the PI and them putting in these types of programs. They're eventually going to have to, like Matt Brown brought it up. He said, when I retired, there was no phone call, no nothing, no programs. And he goes, I fought for years in the UFC. There was nothing. It was just no gold watch. It's just you're done and you go. I think at some point they're going to have to evolve that model. In the WWE, if they're using that as a model, and you look at what they've done, they've put in programs now where they have a certain amount of health care for an extended period of time. They're allowed to go to rehab facilities for life. They're allowed to utilize certain rehabilitation programs. So they're eventually going to have to put some things in place and some stuff there that's going to take care of the fighters. Otherwise, it's going to become a battle.
I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. The fact that they don't have some sort of a pension for them is insane. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. They're going to have to put something in at some point that addresses that, and whether it's they use a model like the NFL. And if you look at all the other sports programs, it's not all cut and dry. You don't fight one fight and you get a pension. The NFL, you have to have 5 years, and then I believe it's 10, the 2 clips. NHL, something similar, or at least put a 401k program in there, or put something that guys can set money aside and start to develop something. And I think they should have a transition team. I think that's something, and I'll say it to Forrest if he's listening or whoever, they should have a transition team for when guys retire. Somebody they can call, someone that can help walk them through maybe a potential opportunity or help them or give them some aid in that, because I think they need that, and I think the fighters need that.
One of the first companies that I ever worked for, I worked for 2 very major companies in my life, very, very big companies. And the first one I ever worked for, they used to do a perspective meeting all the time where they would bring the employees in, and they would have like business leaders and business owners, and they would just they would give you like a State of the Union, and then we'd break off into splinter, and then they would say like, this is how you should invest your money. If you make this much money, this is how much you should be spending. And they gave you a ton of guidance. And, you know, believe it or not, like I didn't agree with them. I was young when I was going through that. I didn't agree with them, but I still did a lot of that. And because of the decisions I made when I was in my early 20s, now in my late 40s, now all of a sudden I have I'm positioned pretty well because of that, you know. And it was because, and in fighting, like I've had tons of fighters. I'm not going to name names, but while they're fighting, they're hot, and no, they don't have to buy supplements. They don't have to buy clothing. They don't have to buy anything. Everybody's just sponsoring them, giving them. But 2 years removed, think about this for a second. So let's say like 2010, who were the top fighters in the UFC in 2010? And then now you get almost 10 years later, where are they at now? Like, who are those guys? How much money are they making? Like, are they still famous or popular? Most of them are not. And I've seen it myself. People are in big financial trouble, and they have some physical issues because of fighting. And it was because when they were at their peak earning potential, they were not investing the right way. They were living like rock stars, just thinking that money was going to keep coming over and over and over again. So with me now, every time I see a fighter get a very expensive car, I get sad. I'm like, dang, I would have liked to see you do something else, buy a piece of property, buy a house, do something like that.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, coach, and giving guys perspective. And that's why sometimes what kills some of these guys and some people in the jiu-jitsu community and in the gyms is they get caught up in the hierarchy. They get caught up in the, you know, black belt, brown belt, whatever you want to call it. You know, I beat you, you beat me. They get caught up in the competition of it. And the competition's good, but the competition isn't going to always put food on the table at the end of the day. So sometimes they have to learn to understand. Like, I know some of my best times at even an SBG in Montana was sitting around, and you'd be sitting next to a former Navy SEAL like Andy Stump or a judge or a lawyer, and just the information and just communicating and just talking and learning. But because we're in such a competitive environment here, a lot of times all these guys see is, I want to go smash that guy, I want to go wrestle that guy, I want to go beat that guy up. They're not taking enough time to hone their internal craft, to build their internal Rolodex, to just learn and take stuff in and see people, as opposed to whether it's a rank or a place in their pecking order in their mind. But the reality is you have to start to separate those things. Like, I look around, like when I look at AG, I don't see a purple belt. I see a guy who's really smart at his business. He's really, you know, takes a keen interest in a lot of things that he does. And it's the same thing with you. When I look at you, I see a good businessman, a huge family man, someone who takes a concerned interest in the individual as opposed to, you know, where they are in his pecking order in his mind. And I think that's a byproduct of a lot of the environment that we're in here, because it's a unique environment. And that's what I try to explain to a lot of folks outside of here. I'm like, Vegas is unique, man. This is like the competitors, environment, and that drives everything. And I see it on the mat.
That's such a great point. You know, it's, man, like you nailed that point home. Out of 100 people you meet in Vegas, very few of them are going to have a 702 area code. So Vegas is literally the United States or the world's hustlers. Like everybody who's hustling in their hometown, they all come out here and live in Vegas. The other thing is there's so many good coaches here in town and so many high-level programs that people, without even consciously thinking about it, if you lecture somebody too much, they just stop coming to your gym. And then there's another coach down the street who's like, yeah, just come and train with me. So it's really easy to get surrounded by yes men, people that are just going to. So that also stops their perspective because you feel like, I definitely don't feel that way. Like, I don't care if someone leaves. They can come and go as they want. Like if you want me to train you, we have to have a relationship. That's just the way that it is. Like I'm not going to go travel with you and leave my family behind if I don't care about you. So for me, like my motivations are a lot different. I want to coach people because I love them. And if I love them, I want to try to influence them and help them win, right? That's why I do it. But you do get fighters that come in and, you know, a lot of people hate me. They hate me because I don't condone. It's like, you're 24, you're a talented guy, and you want to party, but you want to be a fighter too. I don't think you can be both things. I always tell all my fighters, don't do things that you can only do, or don't do things that you can do when you're older while you're younger, because there's certain things that you could only do while you're young that you're not going to be able to do while you're old. So like if you want to go to a bar and hang out, you can do that at 40. That's fine, but you can't fight in the UFC at 40. It's almost impossible. So you should be really dedicated to your craft now, and then the fun will come later. You know, fun comes with success too, you know, so just wait, like grind it out now, sacrifice a little now, accomplish some goals that you have set, and then later in life you can go back and do all the crazy stuff. But you should be working towards your goals while you're young, because when you get older, you're going to be limited athletically. Absolutely.
How important is it coaching guys up on their circle and who they put around them?
I think it's the most important thing. You know, that's the most important thing to me. You see it. I mean, I keep my family very close and my friends very, very close. And those are what I use to govern my decisions. And so, you know, you pretty much are who you hang out with. I agree with that. I mean, it's funny because as I've gotten older, I've become more conservative, more Republican. I was super liberal as a young man. And now that I'm getting older, I'm getting more and more like my parents, where I'm like, hey, listen, why are you hanging out with them? Like they're no
Those
good.
cholos.
Yeah, they're not doing anything. Like I have on one of my channels, I have a video of like where you could really only have 10 people that are super close to you in life, right? And then every one of them is like associated a value, like one -10 to +10. And you inherit 5 that you have no control over. Your mom, your dad, your brothers, and your sisters, right? So let's just say your parents and your family, they're all negative numbers. That total sum goes to like a negative number, like -50. And then now you're choosing to hang out with people that aren't positive in your life either. Now all of a sudden, how can you be successful? And if you are successful, your effort's going to drive the whole group. Where I say that you should just bring people that are amazing and doing great things into your life, and then just as a byproduct of being around rad people, your life is just going to be better. So I think the circle is the most important thing.
I've said this, and AG's heard me say it. This is my thing. All you have to do is this in your analysis of people. Ask yourself this question after. There's always a honeymoon period when you meet someone and someone comes into your life. You're going to take 6-8 weeks to see, is this dude on the level? Is he normal? You like that, AG? On the level, you know where that comes from, right? So on the level, it's a Mason term. So I say to people all the time, if the person, this is my criteria, if the person is not a bridge builder, I can't have anything to do with them. Meaning if they're not someone who's building bridges and building relationships and they don't take a serious effort in that, I can't have anything to do with them. I can't have anything to do with someone who's willing to burn bridges, because after a while, you burn too many bridges, you're on an island, and it gets lonely on that island.
That's so funny that AG is sitting there across the table from us, because I don't burn bridges, and I give people 1 million chances. You know, a couple of years ago, one of my goals, I used the SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, results oriented, and time limited. And I'm a weirdo. I set goals all the time. And one of my goals was to never say no. That was one of my goals for the year. So no matter what anyone asked me, I tried my hardest to say yes. And so I'm a firm believer in bringing people that, like, bridge builders. I think that's an excellent analogy. And I think it's one of the most important qualities in deciding who you're going to let into your circle, is because, like, your general instinct is to always say no. Just always say no and write people off. That's everyone's general instinct. And if you're looking for reasons to burn down bridges and say no, you're going to find a million of them. But you got to really rack your brain and try hard to say yes. And I think that's a skill that goes unnoticed by most people.
I think it comes down to the last point you made, which is time. So you only have so much bandwidth. So while you may be a bridge builder, you may be someone that sets goals, you only also have so much bandwidth. So you have to ask yourself, like, does this fit in, just like an energy bar in jiu-jitsu, does this fit in my bandwidth? Can I give this person the amount of time that they're asking? And sometimes it's just about having a real reality conversation. Like, look, I can't dedicate my resources to this particular project or that particular project right now. This is where I'm at, kind of thing. And it's a balance along the way, and that comes in coaching, that comes in life, that comes in all things, because you only have so much bandwidth, and time is the most precious commodity, and you can't buy it back. So you can never purchase more time. Once it's gone, you can't. It doesn't come back.
I agree, and that's why in the beginning of our conversation, I was saying that I have a list of 10 things that I give people. So I still am not saying no. So someone comes to me and I don't have the bandwidth to give them, right? So it's like, they say, if you want to get something done, you find the busiest person in the room and give them the project, because they're busy because they choose to be. The person that's not busy is just lazy. It's, don't look at it as they're more productive. It's just that they're not taking the opportunities. So like when someone comes to me and they propose a business idea, I say, absolutely, that sounds great. Here, do these things first, and then when you're done with these things, come back to me, and then we'll revisit it and we'll talk about how we're going to handle it. And 99.9% of the time, they don't come back. So technically, I didn't tell them no. I just told them, refine your business plan and your thinking a little bit more, and then come back to me. And if they do all those 10 things, they're probably somebody that I should give some of that bandwidth to, because they're go-getters.
There's only so much of it, and you can't give it to everybody. And it's something that people don't realize. They get offended or they get mad, and this happens across the board. Oh, coach, you didn't hug me enough, you didn't do this enough, you didn't hold my hand enough. The work ultimately is always going to fall on the business owner, the fighter. And I think, and you take this approach, I think as time goes on, you said something in this hour that really hit home with me. I think if more fighters approach their fight game and their training and everything else like a business, like you brought up them writing a business plan, they would see it very differently, because there's so many that don't approach it like a business. Not that they approach it like a hobby, but they still kind of approach it like, oh, I just got to get in and get on the mat and just, kind of hit it. And they don't look at it 360 all the way around, and they're not dialing in all the different components that they need to. And that's going to be something that's going to affect them over time, and it's going to catch up to them, because you've seen endless amounts of folks come through your gym and come through your fingers that they have everything, but they're missing so many components that they need on the back end, which is being organized, the right circle, the right everything. But when you start approaching it like a business, you'll see it different. The paradigm will shift.
Oh, for sure. This whole entire thing, it's life pretty much is robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So if you have a family at home and you need to train 4 times a day, right? You got to do strength and conditioning, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, recovery, whatever. You're spending a significant amount of time outside of the house. Now, if you're a lower level fighter, you've got to spend that time out of the house, plus you got to have a job. And I think the perspective there is you are literally robbing time from the people that love you to train. And if you're not coming in with focused goals in training, then you're just wasting time. And you're literally like hurting everybody. You're hurting yourself and the people that are really paying the expense to train, which is the people that love you, the ones that you're not around when you're training. Because let's face it, 90% of fighters have to have jobs.
That's so true. I didn't think of
It's
that.
very few fighters are actually making a living fighting.
How many, if you were to give me a percentage, how many don't make it that come through your gym and say, Coach, I want to be the next best thing?
Well, I mean, I've never had a UFC champion, not yet, so I think the definition of making it is different for everybody. So like if making it means getting a belt, I've got Lance Palmer, PFL champ, Gustavo's combate champ, and we've had champs at like other levels.
Sure.
But I've also seen fighters that have fought their way to a business that they've been able to parlay and actually be successful. Bristol Morunde is a guy that comes to mind. He has like a pretty good real estate company, him and his wife, and he's got a TV show and he's doing well. So he was able to take his popularity as a fighter and transition into something else. So I think it's relative. If your goal is to win a championship, I would say, how many divisions are there? There's a handful. So everyone fails if that's your ultimate goal. 99.9% of every fighter that sets out, they fail. If parlaying your fighting career into a career that you love that can provide a good life, a healthy life, I'd say a lot do that. A lot of guys are smart enough while the iron's hot. They start building a separate business. They branch off and they start building something with their name and their fame, or even just access to people that can help get things done. I think that's really important. So I would say 35-40% of people parlay their fighting career into something cool. Yeah. But I'd say
I kind of had an idea, but I wanted you to say it so people would understand. It's like anything else. It's tough. You have to grind it out. It's not easy. It's not going to be handed to you. So that's kind of, the understanding here. You always say, when I tap hands with you, I'm making a deal that you're going to carry my weight. So, when you get into this game, you're making a deal that you got to carry your weight and maybe the person on top of you's weight and another person, and maybe it's mom at home that needs the new house or someone that supported you along the way. It's a lot of work, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, if I could give my fighters a blueprint. Have you seen The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg? Mm-hmm. I love that 30-year roof segment where John Goodman is like talking to Mark Wahlberg, and he's saying basically, what did you do with your winnings? You should have bought a house. You should have put a 30-year roof on it and got into a position to fuck you. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I feel with the fighters. There is a fighter in town. I don't want to drop his name. He's an amazing guy, and he just bought a house with him and his wife. And your goal should be, you're in the UFC, you should buy a house, and by the time you're done, you should own it outright. And you should have like a nice little savings account going and some investments. And I just love it when I see a kid driving a modest car, like a nice car that makes sense, a Honda Accord or something or something like that. And then they have a property or two, and they're paying that big nut down. And I know that at least at the end of the day, if they ever get cut from the UFC, that they position themselves to buy time to figure something out.
I actually like the line in the movie better where he says, I actually peed myself. He goes, you're allowed to do that once. He goes, never again. So you're always allowed one kind of fuck up. And he drives that point home by being like, I got drunk once and I actually peed myself. And he goes, I woke up in prison. He goes, everyone's allowed to do that once. He goes, but never again. He puts in perspective, everybody's allowed to screw up. Everyone's allowed to make a mistake. But it's what you learn from it and how you grow and how you mature and what you take away from that. And it comes back to the themes we've been talking about in this. It's growing and developing your business, developing your brand, developing the people around you, and developing a lot of the things that are the intangibles that will take you to the next level as a fighter and human being.
Yeah, I think Malcolm X said it. It's not a crime to have once been a criminal, but it's a tragedy to still be one. And so, I think that statement just means that once you come to the realization that you're doing it wrong, at that point it becomes tragic. Mm-hmm. If you're just young and dumb and you're making decisions, I mean, sure, you're still accountable for those actions. But at the point when you know that you're not doing the right thing and you continue to do that, that's something that's just never good. It's tragic. Yeah.
It's tragic. So we went an hour. I don't want to keep you much longer. I know you took time off from practice to do this, and Coach never does that. And he took some time away from his family that he's talked about so much through this, and they've been absolutely awesome, and it's a joy to see him interact with them whenever they're around the gym and the mat. So I don't want to keep you much longer. But I had an awesome time doing this. This was so much fun. I'm looking forward to 245. I'm looking forward to seeing Ben and seeing what package he brings to the table and how that's all going to shake out. But I'm even more excited because I'm a geek. I love what's going on with Shop No Gi and the transition that you're making there, and all the stuff you're going to have going on with the business and how that's going to evolve in the coming months. Where do you see 10th Planet Vegas in the next 3 to 5 years?
We've been here 4 years, and I think we've positioned ourselves well in this market. I think that we have a very competitive team compared to like what else is going on here. So continued growth with our student base, continually just upgrading our facilities. You know, it's an exciting time. I think that we've got a firm foothold in Vegas, and I'm looking to continue to grow and expand and, you know, keep changing people's lives and exposing more and more people to jiu-jitsu. You know, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people think that I go after the fighters and the D1 wrestlers. Like, I get them because I'm a coach and they come to me because of that. But the people that I really want to influence with jiu-jitsu are the disenfranchised youth. You know, I want the kids that are at home that feel like they have no options and they're looking for something that they need to improve and they don't quite know what that is. And that's kind of the reason why I don't feel like I'm competing with anybody. I want the kids that are insecure, the bullied kids, and I want to bring them in and I want to expose them to jiu-jitsu and change their lives. I mean, that's the real goal. So one of the transitions that I'm going to make is I'm going to try to start doing some more like community outreach stuff, some youth at risk stuff, and really try to get involved with the ones that need it the most.
Yeah, I mentioned it before to AG, putting in like a free Leo course or bringing in like a steeper intro program, stuff that we've seen in the past that stimulates a lot of that, and it's so much fun. But the reality is, again, it comes down to bandwidth and managing all that and rolling that stuff out. I mean, you know, it's just a few of us here. You know, it's kind of bringing it all together. And that's not easy. And I know, Coach, you're working hard to bring all that stuff together and bring that to the students and bring that to the constituency here and the folks here and get this off the ground. But you work tirelessly, you work endlessly, and there's no doubt you're going to continue to achieve a certain level of success here. And I just think the way you carry yourself and the way that you've carried yourself in this environment, given everything that's happened, given the changes in the jiu-jitsu community here, that I think there's no doubt the sky's the limit in terms of what you're going to build here and what you're going to do, and rolling out a lot of the great programs and having, you know, a lot of the guys in to guest instruct and do the seminars. It's so much fun to see kind of take shape, and I've had a lot of fun even having the back and forth with you on the business side and kind of picking your brain and giving you shit from time to time. But it's a lot of fun, and that's something I actually enjoy. And where I'm always coming from with it is a place of like, tell me what do I got to do this, or what do you got to do? You know, how does this all shake out? And I like to always think I speak for the little guy in the equation that's, you know, just kind of going and having a good time and trying to enjoy himself. And you know me, I'm never taking myself too seriously, so I always try to have fun and make it fun. And that's what I like the most about the gym. If someone was saying to me, what do you love the most? It's just a fun, loose atmosphere. And that's the most fun, you know, kind of just hanging out with the guys. And there's so many great dudes there. And you can just have so much fun just hanging out with them. And you'll meet a lot of great people along the way. I'm tremendously thankful for what jiu-jitsu has brought to me and what you've done for me in the community and kind of just coming down here and doing this. It means a ton. So I appreciate it. And let everybody know where they can find you, where the gyms are, and make sure you guys all head over to Shop No Gi. What's the best place to reach you? The best place to reach me would be at Instagram. I mean, that's what I'm on the most, at Coach Casey 10. And then Coach Casey on Facebook. Also, our website's 10thplanetlasvegas.com, shopnogi.com. And you could DM any of those pages, and I will personally respond. And someone will get back to you. So I appreciate everyone. I want to thank everyone. Rory, thank you in the studio. Make sure you guys head over to kvar.com. Go purchase some freedom. I want to thank everybody here. I want to thank Built Monster Quest, everybody. And Rory, I think we're good. We cover everything? We out?
Yep.
All right.
Yep, we're out.